This October 1st will mark the 130th anniversary of one of the deadliest hurricanes to ever hit Louisiana.
A Category 4 storm in 1893 wiped out the coastal community of Cheniere Caminada, located near the present-day Grand Isle. Dave McNamara has the story in the heart of Louisiana.
This small cemetery stands along Highway 1 near Grand Isle. A dead oak tree, the sinking ground, and the crumbling graves are a fading memorial to a monster hurricane. In the late 1800s, Cheniere Caminada was a thriving fishing village. It was the high ground in the coastal prairie.
We lost more people in that storm than any storm that ever hit Louisiana.
There were cottages on the Gulf Beach and fishing in the bay. It was a good life until a late-season hurricane slammed into the coast. In this one community where 1,700 people live, half of those residents died. The violent storm caught residents by surprise.
They didn't get on their boats to go up the bayou to higher land. They didn't try to evacuate. They were all caught there in the middle of the night suddenly.
John Doucet's great-great-grandfather and family were trapped in the terror of the hurricane.
When the walls imploded and the roof fell, the roof was floating, so it ended up on the high part of the island, and underneath that triangular structure is where everybody survived.
7 out of my 8 grandparents lived here, and they all survived the storm. My grandfather was born February 1893. He was one of the few babies to survive. When you looked at the storm, the greatest percentage of life loss was kids. After that, it was women, and then it was men. And it was basically luck and who had the extra muscle power to hang on to a tree or a floating piece of lumber and make it through the storm.
Hundreds of victims were buried in the town cemetery. Only a few of the grave sites are still recognizable today. Wendell Curall's ancestors lived in this sturdy cypress house at Cheniere Caminada. It was one of only a few structures that survived. It was moved up the bayou where it stood for more than a century. It was recently purchased and moved again by a new owner who is restoring the house.
I think it's 7 people, if not more, survived that great hurricane in this house. It's incredibly remarkable how it stayed together. So yeah, it's quite a house.
The 1893 hurricane marked the start of a gradual retreat from coastal Louisiana, as more storms and disappearing wetlands have pushed people to higher ground. With the heart of Louisiana, Dave McNamara, Fox 8 Local First.
The town of Grand Isle is hosting a day of remembrance on Sunday, October 1st. For more details, go to heartoflouisiana.com.